chapter 8, commencing in verse number 22 through verse number 25. Now it came to pass on a certain day that he went into a ship with his disciples and said unto them, Let us go over unto the other side of the lake. And they launched forth. But as they sailed, he fell asleep. And there came down a storm of wind on the lake, and they were filled with water and were in jeopardy. And they came to him and awoke him, saying, Master, Master, we perish. Then he arose and rebuked the wind and the raging of the water, and they ceased, and there was a calm. And he said unto them, Where is your faith? And they, being afraid, wondered, saying one to another, What manner of man is this? For he commandeth even the winds and water, and they obey him. Thank you. You may have your seats. The grass withers and the flower thereof fadeth away, but the word of our God shall stand forever. I want to talk again from this subject at the intersection of expectation and disappointment. At the intersection of expectation and disappointment. How many of us who will be honest enough to admit this morning that more times than we can count, we have stood at the intersection of expectation and disappointment? We expected one thing and received something else instead. We were more qualified than the other candidate, but they got the job. We thought our marriage would last forever, but he or she walked out on their commitment. Or you thought that your life would be in one place, and now you seem to be stuck in a rut. You thought you would be enjoying these golden years, but now you have to take care of grandchildren for children who are incarcerated. Or you have plans for your future, but your parents are aging, and you are saddled with that privilege of having to take care of them like their children. Or maybe you thought the people who should love you and support you and encourage you are not the ones to help you in your time of need. You stand at the intersection of expectation and disappointment. I would rather suggest to us today, brothers and sisters, that it is a matter of perspective, because we cannot see in the future. We don't have all the answers. We don't have God's blueprint for our lives. I think we would be more patient if we knew when the trial was going to end. We would have more courage if we could just see and peep into God's plans for us to see how long the trouble was going to last. It bothers us that we don't know, that we can't see around the corner. We are not always able to trace God's hand in our lives. Because there are times when it seems that God is distant, that God is absent. And there are questions that well up in our spirits that we are too Christian to even let come out of our mouths. But we ask ourselves sometimes, if we are honest, is this really what it's all about? Does God really care? Did Jesus really die for my sins? Is there such a place as heaven? If God is so good, why am I struggling so much? If the Bible is right, if God is loving, if God is just, if God is holy, why is there so much oppression in the world? Why doesn't God just flip a switch and change it in a moment's notice? He can do it. Why doesn't he come to my rescue? I've been praying, no answer has come. I've been singing, it doesn't seem like anything is going to work out. Those questions are in our throats, but we are too Baptist to let them come out of our mouths. We don't want folk to know that sometimes we have doubts. I wish I had a witness here. Sometimes when we are in the prison of disappointment, there are doubts that come into our minds. Has it all been worth it? Or is this Christianity just something somebody thought up the other day? Here was the disciples, along with their master Jesus. And Jesus has been teaching in a place, and his mother and his brothers and sisters come to get him out of there because they really think he's losing his mind. Really, when you get home. They really think something is wrong with him. And so they come to this house where Jesus is teaching, and one of his family members says, tell him to come outdoors. And they come back in the house and tell Jesus, your mother and your brothers and sisters are outside calling for you. And Jesus says, who is my mother? Who is my brother? Who is my sister but the one that does the will of my Father? I wish I had a Bible reader here. He's tired now. He's been healing the sick and giving sight to the blind. He's been opening deaf ears. He's been causing the dumb to speak. Jesus has been on a whirlwind tour of miracles and preaching and teaching. And he says to his disciples, let's get into a boat and go over to the other side of the lake. And the Bible says they get in the boat and they go over to the other side, and midway the voyage, Jesus is sleeping and the storm is raging. Isn't that the way it is sometimes in our lives? Jesus seems to be sleeping and the storm is raging. Somebody ought to help me talk here. They are on their way to the other side of the lake, and halfway the voyage, all of a sudden, there's a squall of wind that just comes down on their little boat. That's the way life is. You're just walking along, having a good life. Things are going your way. You got a raise on your job. Your loan has been approved at the bank. You got a new car. You're healthy. You're feeling well. And all of a sudden, a squall, a storm, a strong wind comes in your life, tearing everything to shreds. The storm is raging. Jesus is sleeping. You've got to be awfully young not to have experienced life storms. Experienced Christians in here today who's been with the Lord a while will let you know that there's not always sunshine. I wish I had some help right here. The day is not always bright. It's not always happiness and good times. There are days when you don't feel like getting out of the bed. I wish I had some honest believers here. There are times when life turns on you and the things you thought would work out one way seems to be failing and going in an opposite direction. And while the storm is brewing in your life, Jesus is absent. He's missing. But not really. Because the Bible says, while the storm is raging, Jesus is on board sleeping. Now listen, these are not weekend fishermen. They are experienced on the water and experienced in their vessel, and they've been through storms before. But this storm is about to turn their boat over. They are about to capsize. This is no small squall of wind. It's about to tear them from their boat. And they are afraid. Now, I don't want you to raise your hand. But when life turns on you and you don't know which way to turn, you get terrified. Now, if you haven't been there, don't clap, don't shout, don't say anything. But there's about 50 or 65 of us in here right now who've been in a place in our lives when we didn't know which way to turn. We were scared of what somebody was going to think. We were afraid of what somebody was going to say, because we've been strong Bible teachers and singing in the choir with our robe on, and we just can't let people know that we're scared. But I think I ought to tell you, brothers and sisters, nothing's wrong with admitting that your life is out of control. Nothing is wrong with admitting that there's a storm in your life that you can't handle it, because the moment you admit you can't handle it, you got to wake up Jesus. And I need about 5 or 6 folk in here who knows that when you wake him up, he will stand on your little ship and say to the storms in your life, peace, be still. Let me get your theology right. Let me get your perspective straight. All a storm is, this is all a storm is. All a storm is disturbed peace. That's all. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's just atmospheric conditions converging in a place out of control. And you can't control storms. You can't make nobody stay with you who wants a divorce. You can't make a child do right who's determined to get on drugs. Wish I had somebody to help me. I don't care how much you pray. I don't care how much you read the Bible. You can't make a family member act right if they are determined to go to hell. Those storms just happen in our lives, and they are out of our control. You did the best you could. You raised them right. You prayed for them. You asked God to bless them. You didn't send them to church. You brought them to church. And they don't come to church right now. That's out of your control. That storm is just disturbed peace. But you got to get your perspective. Because Jesus said, let's go over. But the storm is so fierce that they are afraid of going under. Jesus said, we're going over. The storm says, y'all going under. Jesus said, we're going over. The storm says, you're going under. Somebody gonna shout here in just a minute. Now Jesus said, we going over. The storm says, you going under. You got to determine right now, who are you going to listen to? A storm or the one who made it? He fell asleep. And there came a storm. And they are filled with water. And they're about to perish. Now listen. They've done all they can do. And that's what faith is. Faith is doing all you can do. It's not unfaithful. It's not unspiritual for you to do all you can do. Because God ain't going to do for you what you can do for yourself. No, you praying for a job, you got to pound the pavement. See how quiet you got right there? God is not going to send a job to your house. You got to fill out the application. You got to qualify. Talk back to me if you can. And then you got to go to work when you get the job. You can't get there at 9:15. You're supposed to be there at 9 o'clock. Come on, brothers and sisters. Help me preach if you can. You can't get on the job and run off copies for your Sunday school class and bring ink pens home that don't belong to you. And you're supposed to be quitting at 5, but 4:30 you in the car because you got a hair appointment. Well, I wish I had my 7:30 crowd. They more spiritual than y'all. Y'all act like y'all so holy and y'all do everything. I know it's somebody in here like me who's messed up with issues and problems and storms and situations that you ain't telling nobody about. Because there's some stuff that's going on in our lives we can't share with nobody because everybody don't want to see you come out. Have I got a witness here? Be careful who you share your storm report with. Because some folk want to see you go under. But Jesus said, you're going over. And he is so confident that they're going to go over that he goes to sleep. Oh, brothers and sisters, that's what real faith is. You can't do nothing about the storm, go to sleep. Because there's somebody else who's not sleeping. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel, have I got a Bible reader, will neither slumber nor sleep. Now listen. Jesus may be asleep on your boat, but he's not asleep at the wheel. He knows exactly what's going on. His is not a sleep of slumber. It's not a sleep of inattention. It's not a sleep like he does not know what's happening around him. He's just tired, and he's going to get up when the situation demands it. Let me see if I can make that make sense. Today is my daughter's 20th birthday. And we brought her home from Methodist Hospital. She's the only thing I own free and clear. I've paid Methodists all their money. And she's the only thing that is free and clear mine. We brought her home from the hospital. There used to be a store in the village called the baby store. And we went and bought an expensive crib at the baby store. And when we brought her home from the hospital, I would sleep underneath the crib. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to see if she was still breathing. I'd get close to her to hear if she was still breathing. I'd put my finger by her nose to see if she was still alive. I couldn't believe she was mine. I sleep under the crib. If she moved, I moved. If she made a noise, I was there to pay attention to it. And then when she didn't want to sleep in the crib, she slept on my chest. And when she moved, I moved. If she whimpered, I woke up. I slept light because I wanted to be attentive to her every need. I could tell if the cry was hungry or wet. I could tell if the cry was fussy or she just wanted my attention. Because I would make sure she was still breathing, because she's the only thing I own with no payments. She's mine. God gave me this brand new baby. And I want to make sure I do everything I can to take care of my baby. Now let's lift that up a little higher. If I know how to discern the cries of my baby that I didn't give birth to, how much more does my heavenly Father, who knows the numbers of the hairs on my head, who notices when a sparrow falls out of his nest, how much more does my Father care for me than I care for my own baby? He's not sleeping because he's not paying attention. He's not just sleeping in the boat. He's awake in my situation, waiting for them to call him. And the Bible does not say who calls him. Perhaps it's a collective cry. Perhaps everybody cries at the same time. But I believe because of his personality, it must have been Peter, who is calling Jesus, really scolding him, saying to him, you know what's going on? Why don't you help us? You see, brothers and sisters, most of our prayers is about getting God to do what we want him to do. This is not really a cry of need. This is a cry that comes almost like a command. Master, get up from there. Don't you care that we are about to perish? And when Jesus hears that cry, he arises from sleep, stands on board their little vessel, and says to them, where is your faith? Now, in between where is your faith, there's another question that we have to deal with. Jesus gets up and says, where is your faith? He stills the storm. The waters are calm. Everything goes back to normal. The seas look like a child tired after throwing a tantrum. It's placid and calm. They can see themselves in the waters now that just a moment ago almost capsized their boat. And now the waters are as calm as a child after a tantrum. Jesus says, where is your faith? But then they have a question. And that question is, Who is this? That's a strange question. I wish I had one or two more believers. I'm going to leave you alone in just a minute. I'm going back on vacation when I get through fooling with y'all in just a second. Who is this? That's an enigmatic question to ask. Because if they don't know who he is, why wake him up? And if you wake him up, why ask who he is? You missed that. If you've got to ask who he is, then why wake him up? And if you're going to wake him up, you must know who he is. Because waking him up and not knowing who he is not going to still the storm. The only reason to wake him up is he can do something about your storm. And these two questions are the parentheses in which we live our Christian lives. Where's your faith? Who is this? And brothers and sisters, as I hurry to the close, when you find out who this is, it answers the question of where is your faith? Because sooner or later, your faith rests in who this is. I wish I had 5 or 6 more believers here. When you find out who he is, there's no longer a question of where is your faith. Because when you know who he is, no storm will ever overwhelm you. Because you know if he says go over, there's no possibility of you going under. You're going to help me close this, won't you? But when you got to ask who he is, it's not really a question that demands an answer. It's just an amazement, a marvel of what he can do. Now, I need somebody here today who knows from your own Christian walk that you've seen God do some things that could never have happened in your life if he didn't do it. Oh, that ought not fall on deaf ears this morning. Somebody in here know that you 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 ain't supposed to be where you are right now. It was nobody but Jesus. Have I got a witness here? He paid your bills for you. You thought when you lost that job that was the end of the world. But God never closes a door unless he's getting ready to open a window. Have I got a witness here? And you're better off now than you were 5, 10, 15 years ago. Because what you thought you couldn't get along without, he showed up to be everything you need. Have I got a witness here? He knows how to still storms in your life. I want to talk to somebody here who's going through, somebody here who's at the intersection of expectation and disappointment. You've had some expectations in your life that have not been realized. There's some things in your world that has gone wrong, but you've been staying with God through your stuff, through your storms and through your problems. And some days are better than other days, but you still got joy. You still got faith to believe that if God says to go over, there's no possibility of you going under. And folk look at you and wonder how you still make it with all the stuff you're going through. They don't understand that you got something going on the inside that cannot be disturbed by what's happening on the outside. Have I got a witness here? He says, I will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on me. Have I got a witness here? Jesus may look like he's asleep on your boat, but he's not asleep at the wheel. He has everything under control. I said he has everything under control. I said he has everything under control. Let me say it one more time. He's got everything under control. We were coming in on United Airlines, and there was some turbulence just before we got into Houston. And the pilot said to the flight attendants to be seated. Turn off your electronic equipment. Talking to all of us on board the plane. The pilot has turned on the fasten your seatbelt sign, and they will be coming through the cabin to pick up all the stuff that you need them to pick up. And they said for the duration of the flight, keep your seatbelts fastened. Keep your seat trays in their full upright and lock position. We're going to be on the ground in a minute, but for the moment, keep your seatbelts fastened. Keep your seat trays in their full upright and lock position. Keep your carry-on luggage in the overhead bins. There's a little turbulence going on right now. We're going to be on the ground in a minute, but for the moment, keep your seat trays in their full upright lock position. Keep your carry-on luggage in the overhead bins. Keep your seat belts fastened. There's a little turbulence going on. We're going to be on the ground in a minute, but for the moment, keep your seat belts fastened. Your seat trays in their full upright lock position. Your carry-on luggage in the overhead bins. We're going to be on the ground momentarily. Let me say to somebody here at Lilly Grove who's standing at the intersection of expectation and disappointment. You're going through a little turbulence right now. It's stormy in your house. It's storming in your family. It's storming in your marriage. It's storming in your financial situation. It's storming with your health situation. You're going to be out of it in a minute. You're going to be on the ground in a moment. But right now, fasten your seatbelts. Keep your seat trays in their full upright and locked position. Keep your carry-on luggage in the overhead bin. Don't try to go in the cockpit and tell the pilot what to do. You don't have any flight experience. You don't have any training in flying. Why don't you just fasten your seat belts? Put your seat trays back in their full upright lock position. Your carry-on luggage in the overhead bins. God has everything under control. There might be somebody here today standing at the intersection of expectation and disappointment. Things have not worked out well in your life, but I've got some good news for you. All you got to do is wake up Jesus. All you need to do is say, Master, I'm about to perish. And he will get up from where he's sleeping, stand on your little vessel and say, peace, be still. And when the Lord stills your storm, don't stay home and act like you don't know who kept you. Don't sit in your seat and act like you don't know who brought you. Don't get all dressed up for church and sit down through an entire worship and never open your mouth. If God brought you out, if God stilled your storm, if God made a way out of no way, why don't you come on and help me here? Tell God, thank you. You brought me out. I never would have made it if it wasn't for your grace. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for bringing me out. Now somebody sitting next to you today might be at the intersection of expectation and disappointment. Why don't you grab your neighbor by the hand? Tell him whatever you're going through, this too will pass. This too will pass. Shake somebody else's hand. Come on, grab somebody else and tell them, I know from experience that trouble don't last always. After a while, God will bring you out. He will bring you out. Won't he do it? I said, won't he do it? I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. Why don't you grab somebody? Tell them you don't know like I know what the Lord. Yeah. Come on, grab a neighbor. Tell him, get a good look at me. I'm coming out of this thing. Laugh at me now, but God's bringing me out. Talk about me now, but you ought to see me after a while. God is gonna bring me out. I know he's all right. I've seen the lightning flashing. I've heard the thunder roll. I've felt sin's breakers dashing. They were trying to conquer my soul. You're going to help me, won't you? But I heard the voice of Jesus telling me, fight on. He promised. He promised. He promised. He promised. He promised. I know he's all right. He walks with me. He talks with me. He tells me I am his own. Come on, grab somebody else. Tell him he will turn it around. He will turn it around. He will turn it around. Won't he do it? Say yeah. Say yeah. Say yeah. What kind of man is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? Who is this who can talk to storms and they obey? Nobody? Nobody can do that but Jesus. He will calm your storm. Yes, he will. 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 I've tried him for myself. Yes, he will. Yes, he will. If you just have faith, he may not come when you want it. But somebody ought to help me testify. When he shows up, he's right on time.